The clay was still warm beneath Zara Grimsby's fingers when she heard the first gunshot echo through Cherry Creek, Colorado territory. And she knew without looking that her peaceful morning was about to shatter like one of her unfired pots. It was the spring of 1876, and the small settlement nestled in the shadow of the Rocky Mountains had been her home for 3 years now. She had come west from Philadelphia after her father's pottery business collapsed, leaving her with nothing but his skills and her determination to start fresh where nobody knew her family's shame. The little shop she had built with her own hands sat at the edge of town, close enough to the creek that she could easily fetch water for her work, far enough from the saloons that she could usually work in peace. Usually. Zara wiped her hands on her apron and moved to the window, peering through the wavy glass at the commotion in the street. 3 men on horseback were firing pistols into the air, whooping and hollering as terrified townspeople scattered. She recognized them as part of the Callahan gang, outlaws who had been terrorizing settlements throughout the territory for months. The sheriff had ridden out yesterday with 2 deputies to track cattle thieves to the north, leaving Cherry Creek vulnerable. Her heart pounded as she watched one of the men dismount in front of the general store, kicking open the door with his boot. She should hide, she knew that. She should blow out her kiln fire, lock her doors, and pray they passed her by. But Mrs. Henderson was in that store, and she was 8 months pregnant. Old Mr. Yates worked there too, and he had a bad heart. Before she could talk herself out of it, Zara was moving. She grabbed the iron poker she used to tend her kiln and slipped out the back door, circling around through the alley behind the buildings. Her hands were shaking, and she had no idea what she planned to do, but she could not just hide while people she cared about were in danger. She had just reached the back entrance of the general store when she heard a sound that made her blood run cold. A man's rough laughter, Mrs. Henderson's frightened whimper, and Mr. Yates' trembling voice saying, "Please, just take what you want and go." Zara eased the door open, gripping her poker so tightly her knuckles went white. The scene inside made her stomach turn. 2 of the outlaws had Mr. Yates on the floor, while the third was backing Mrs. Henderson against the counter, a leer on his unshaven face. "Well now, what do we have here?" The man said, reaching toward Mrs. Henderson's belly. "Looks like Cherry Creek has some valuable merchandise after all. Leave her alone." Zara's voice rang out before she could stop herself, and 3 pairs of surprised eyes turned toward her. The man nearest Mrs. Henderson recovered first, his expression shifting from surprise to cruel amusement. "And who might you be, sweetheart?" "The town welcoming committee. I am someone who is asking you nicely to leave," Zara said, trying to keep her voice steady even as her legs trembled. "Take what supplies you need and ride on. There is no need for anyone to get hurt." The outlaw laughed, a sound like gravel scraping glass. "Asking nicely. That is real sweet, but I think maybe we will take our time, see what other treasures this little town has hiding." He took a step toward her. "Starting with you." Zara raised the poker, but she knew it was useless. These were hardened criminals, and she was a potter with no fighting experience. Still, she would not just surrender. If nothing else, maybe she could buy time for someone to get help, though where that help would come from with the sheriff gone, she had no idea. The outlaw was 3 steps away when the back door exploded inward. Later, Zara would struggle to describe exactly what happened next. It was like watching a force of nature unleashed, a mountain storm given human form. The man who filled the doorway was massive, easily 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle beneath buckskin and fur. His dark hair fell past his shoulders, tied back with a leather cord, and his beard was trimmed close to a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. In his hands, a rifle seemed almost small, though Zara knew it was a full-sized weapon. "The lady asked you to leave," the man said, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. "I suggest you do it." The three outlaws spun to face this new threat, and Zara saw something she had not expected in their eyes: fear. "Dakota Pierce," one of them breathed. "We thought you were up north, trapping bear." "I was," the mountain man named Dakota said, taking a step into the room. Even in the confined space, he moved with a predator's grace, every muscle coiled and ready. "Decided to come down to sell my furs." "Imagine my surprise when I ride into town and find rats crawling where they do not belong." The outlaw who had been approaching Zara tried to sneer, though it came out more as a grimace. "That is big talk from one man facing three. Even if you are Dakota Pierce, you ain't faster than 3 bullets." Dakota's smile was not pleasant. "Want to test that theory?" For a long moment, nobody moved. Zara could hear her own heartbeat, could see the barely perceptible shift in Dakota's weight as he prepared to move. She had no idea who this man was, but clearly his reputation preceded him, and these hardened outlaws were genuinely frightened. The standoff broke when the youngest of the three outlaws, a man who could not have been more than 20, lost his nerve. "This ain't worth it," he said, backing toward the front door. "There's easier pickings elsewhere." "Raid, you coward," the leader started to say, but then Dakota's rifle shifted ever so slightly, and the calculation in the outlaw's eyes changed. Whatever he saw in Dakota's face convinced him that discretion was indeed the better part of valor. "Fine, we are leaving, but this ain't over, Pierce. Callahan, don't forget." "Tell Callahan I said hello," Dakota replied mildly. "Tell him I am looking forward to our reunion." The three outlaws backed toward the door, keeping their hands visible and their eyes on Dakota. Once they were outside, Zara heard the thunder of hooves as they mounted and rode off at a gallop. Only then did Dakota lower his rifle, turning to check on the room's other occupants. "Everyone all right?" he asked, and Zara was struck by how his voice gentled when addressing Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Yates, all the steel wrapped in concern. "Yes, thank you," Mr. Yates said shakily, accepting Dakota's hand to pull himself to his feet. "They came in shooting, said they were taking whatever they wanted, if you had not shown up when you did." "No need to dwell on what might have been," Dakota said firmly. He moved to Mrs. Henderson, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he helped her to a chair. "Madam, should I fetch the doctor?" Mrs. Henderson shook her head, though she was pale and trembling. "No, I am fine, just frightened. My baby is still moving, I can feel him kicking up a storm. I think he is upset about all the excitement." Dakota's stern face softened into something approaching a smile. "Smart baby, knowing when to make his presence known." He straightened, his eyes finally landing on Zara, and she felt the impact of that gaze like a physical thing. His eyes were a startling shade of blue, like mountain lakes, and they studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "That was a brave thing you did," he said quietly. "Also extremely foolish." Zara bristled, some of the fear draining away to be replaced by indignation. "I could not just hide while they hurt people." "Brave and foolish are not mutually exclusive," Dakota replied, but there was something in his expression that might have been respect. "What exactly were you planning to do with that poker? Stir them into submission?" Despite everything, Zara felt a laugh bubble up, slightly hysterical but genuine. "I had not thought that far ahead. I just knew I had to do something." Dakota shook his head, but there was a hint of a smile at the corners of his mouth. "Well, next time you decide to face down armed outlaws, maybe wait until you have better odds, or backup, preferably both." "I will keep that in mind," Zara said dryly, "though I hope there will not be a next time." "There will be," Dakota said grimly, the momentary lightness vanishing. Those were Callahan's men. He does not take kindly to being thwarted. They will be back, probably with reinforcements. Where is your sheriff? Rode out yesterday tracking cattle thieves, Mr. Yates supplied. Not expected back for at least 2 more days. Dakota cursed softly under his breath. Of course, they probably knew that, planned their timing accordingly. He was silent for a moment, clearly thinking. All right, I need to get my furs to the trading post, but then I am going to ride out and see if I can track your sheriff, let him know what happened. In the meantime, everyone needs to stay alert. Keep weapons close, do not go anywhere alone. He turned back to Zara, and again she felt the weight of his attention. You, Miss Potter, should probably stay somewhere more central in town. That shop of yours is too isolated. How did you know I am a potter? Zara asked, surprised. Dakota's lips quirked. Your hands. Clay under the fingernails, calluses in specific places from working the wheel, plus you still have a smudge of it on your cheek. Zara resisted the urge to touch her face, very aware that she must look a mess. Her dark hair had escaped its pins during her dash through the alley, her dress was dusty, and apparently she was wearing her work on her skin. The shop is my livelihood. I cannot just abandon it. It is not an abandon if you are protecting your life, Dakota said patiently. What good is a livelihood if you are not alive to enjoy it? He is right, dear, Mrs. Henderson said softly. You could stay with my husband and me. We have that extra room since our son moved to Denver. Zara wanted to argue, but she also was not foolish enough to ignore good sense when she heard it. Her little shop had no real defenses, and if those men came back looking for revenge or sport, she would be helpless. All right. But I need to bank my kiln first, make sure nothing burns down in my absence. I have pieces that need to be fired properly. I will help you, Dakota said immediately. Show me what needs to be done. They walked back to her shop in silence, Zara very aware of Dakota's presence beside her. He was even bigger up close, his shoulders so broad they blocked out the sun. His buckskin shirt stretched across a chest that looked like it could shrug off bullets, and his arms were corded with muscle earned from hard living in the mountains. Everything about him spoke of strength and capability, of a man who had survived things that would break lesser people. And yet, when they entered her shop and he looked around at her work, his expression was one of wonder. You made all of these? He asked, moving to examine a set of bowls she had glazed in shades of mountain blue and forest green. Yes, Zara said, a flutter of pride warming her chest despite the circumstances. Pottery is what I do. It is what my father did and his father before him. I might be the first in my family to do it out west, but the clay speaks the same language everywhere. Dakota picked up one of the bowls with surprising care for such large hands, turning it in the light. These are beautiful, really beautiful. The way you captured the colors of the high country, the glaze work. This is not just functional pottery, this is art. Zara felt her cheeks warm at the genuine admiration in his voice. Thank you. I try to make pieces that are both useful and beautiful. There is enough harsh utility in the world. I like to think that even something as simple as a bowl can bring a little beauty to someone's table. Dakota set the bowl down carefully and turned to look at her, his blue eyes intense. Your hands create beautiful things, he said quietly, but I suspect your heart is even more beautiful still. The words hung in the air between them, and Zara found she could not look away from his gaze. There was something in his expression, a loneliness that matched her own, a recognition that perhaps they were both people who had found themselves in this wild territory seeking something they could not name. You do not know me, she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. No, Dakota agreed. But I would like to, if you would let me. Before Zara could respond, voices outside interrupted the moment. People were gathering in the street, talking excitedly about the confrontation with the outlaws, about Dakota's arrival. The spell between them broke and Zara turned away, suddenly flustered. "We should secure the kiln," she said, trying to regain her composure. "I can show you what needs to be done." Dakota did not press, simply nodded and followed her instructions. He was a quick study, listening carefully as she explained how to bank the fire properly, how to ensure the pieces inside would cool slowly and evenly. His hands, so large and strong, were surprisingly deft, and he handled her tools with respect. "You live up in the mountains?" Zara asked as they worked, curious about this man who had appeared like an answer to a prayer. "Most of the time," Dakota confirmed. "I have a cabin about 2 days' ride north of here, up near the tree line. I trap bear, wolf, mountain lion, sell the furs, and meet a few times a year. It is a solitary life, but I prefer it that way, or I thought I did." There was something in that last phrase that made Zara look up. What changed? Dakota was quiet for a moment, staring into the banked embers of her kiln. "I have been alone for 7 years now, since my wife and son died. Cholera outbreak in a settlement near Fort Collins. I was away on a hunting trip, and by the time I got back, they were already gone, buried in ground that was still frozen from winter." Zara's heart clenched with sympathy. "I am so sorry." "I ran to the mountains after that," Dakota continued, his voice low. "Figured if I was alone, I could not lose anyone again, could not feel that kind of pain. I told myself I was content with just the wilderness and my own company. But lately, I have been wondering if that is living or just surviving. And then today, I walked into that store and saw you standing there with nothing but a poker and your courage, ready to defend people you cared about, and I thought maybe I have been wrong about being alone." Zara did not know what to say to that. She understood loneliness. She had been alone since coming west, keeping people at a friendly distance, because it was easier than risking rejection when they learned about her family's disgrace. She had told herself that her work was enough, that creating beauty was its own reward. But standing in her workshop with this mountain man who had appeared out of nowhere to save her, she felt something stir that she had thought long dead. "I came west to escape my past," she found herself saying. "My father made a business mistake, trusted the wrong partner, and we lost everything. He died of a broken heart 6 months later, and I could not stay in Philadelphia. Every door was closed to me, every former friend suddenly too busy to call. So I came here to start over, to prove that I could make something of myself without my family name or connections. But starting over meant cutting ties, meant being alone." "And has it been worth it?" Dakota asked gently. Zara looked around her shop at the evidence of 3 years of hard work and determination. "I thought so. I built all of this with my own hands, every board, every shelf. I taught myself to prospect for clay in the creek banks, to mix my own glazes from what I could find or trade for. I have customers now, people who seek out my work specifically. I proved I could survive on my own terms." "But," Dakota prompted, "but surviving is not the same as living," Zara echoed his earlier words. "I have spent 3 years keeping everyone at arm's length, afraid to let anyone get too close, afraid of being hurt or disappointed or judged, and I am tired of it. Today, when I saw those men threatening Mrs. Henderson and Mr. Yates, I realized that somewhere along the way, this place stopped being just where I survived and became home. These people became people I care about, and that matters more than protecting myself." Dakota nodded slowly. "That is a hard lesson to learn." "I am still learning it myself." He finished banking the last of the embers and straightened. "There. Your kiln should be fine for a few days. Anything else you need to secure? Zara looked around, making mental notes. I should bring my tools with me and maybe a few of my best pieces. If those men do come back and decide to cause damage out of spite, I would rather not lose everything. Smart, Dakota approved. I will help you carry them. They spent the next hour carefully packing up her most valuable items, wrapping bowls and vases in cloth and straw. Dakota proved to have a steady hand and a good eye for what was worth saving. When they finally emerged, loaded down with bundles, the sun was past its zenith, and the street had taken on a tense, watchful quality. People were armed, windows were shuttered, and the normal bustle of midday commerce had been replaced by wary vigilance. Dakota walked her to the Henderson house, refusing to leave until she was safely inside. Mrs. Henderson welcomed her warmly, immediately fussing over where to put her things and insisting she stay as long as necessary. Her husband, Thomas, was a burly blacksmith with kind eyes who shook Dakota's hand with genuine gratitude. "You saved my wife today," Thomas said gruffly. "I was at the forge when it happened. If anything had happened to her or the baby, I do not know what I would have done. We owe you a debt." "No debt," Dakota said firmly. "Just doing what anyone should do." But his eyes drifted to Zara as he said it, and she felt that flutter in her chest again. "I am going to ride out and try to find your sheriff," Dakota continued. "The sooner he knows about this, the sooner he can organize a proper response. But I will be back tomorrow by sunset at the latest. Miss Grimsby, will you be all right here?" "I will be fine," Zara assured him, though part of her wanted to ask him not to leave, which was ridiculous. She had just met this man a few hours ago. She had no claim on him, no reason to expect him to stay on her account. But Dakota stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "When I get back, I would like to talk more, about starting over, about what it means to really live instead of just surviving, if you are interested." Zara's heart was beating fast again, but this time it had nothing to do with fear. "I am interested." His smile transformed his face, softening all those hard edges. "Good. Then I will see you tomorrow evening. Stay safe, Zara Grimsby." The way he said her name, with that deep rumble of a voice, made her shiver despite the warmth of the spring afternoon. She watched from the Hendersons' window as he strode to the livery stable, collected his enormous roan horse, and rode out of town heading north. Even mounted, he looked like something out of legend, a frontier hero from the pages of the dime novels that sometimes made their way to Cherry Creek. "That is quite a man," Mrs. Henderson said, coming to stand beside Zara at the window. "And unless I am very much mistaken, he is quite taken with you." Zara felt her cheeks heat. "We only just met." "Sometimes that is all it takes," Mrs. Henderson said with a knowing smile. "I knew I would marry Thomas 5 minutes after we met. He was shoeing my father's horse, and he looked up at me with those gentle eyes, and I just knew. Sometimes the heart recognizes what it needs before the head catches up." "It is too fast," Zara protested weakly. "I do not know anything about him. You know he is brave. You know he is kind to strangers. You know he protected this town when he had no obligation to do so. You know he appreciates beauty when he sees it in both art and people." Mrs. Henderson patted her arm. "That is actually quite a lot to know about someone. The rest is just details that you learn along the way." Zara wanted to argue, but she could not. Because the truth was, she had felt something when she looked at Dakota Pierce, something she had never felt before. Not just attraction, though he was certainly attractive in a rough, untamed way. It was deeper than that. It was recognition, like seeing another lonely soul and understanding that maybe, just maybe, neither of them had to be lonely anymore. The afternoon passed slowly. Zara tried to help Mrs. Henderson with dinner preparations, but she was distracted, her mind wandering to a mountain man riding north. She wondered about his cabin, what it looked like. She imagined him alone up there, surrounded by wilderness and silence, nursing a grief 7 years old. She understood that kind of grief, the kind that became a companion you carried with you even as you tried to move forward. Dinner was a quiet affair. Thomas had closed the forge early, and several other families had gathered at the Henderson house, seeking safety in numbers. The town was nervous, jumping at shadows, and Zara could not blame them. The Callahan gang was notorious for their cruelty and their tendency to hold grudges. Dakota's interference today would not go unpunished if they had their way. As darkness fell, Thomas organized the men into watch shifts. Even Mr. Yates, despite his age and heart condition, insisted on taking a turn. The women gathered in the main room, some doing mending, others just sitting and drawing comfort from companionship. Someone started singing an old hymn, and others joined in, their voices soft and slightly trembling but determined. Zara sat near the window, ostensibly keeping watch but really just lost in thought. She thought about what Dakota had said about her heart being beautiful. It had been so long since anyone had seen past her surface to what lay beneath. In Philadelphia, she had been judged by her family name, and when that name became tarnished, people stopped seeing her at all. Here in Cherry Creek, she had deliberately kept herself apart, pleasant but distant, afraid of letting anyone close enough to hurt her. But today, for the first time in years, she had felt truly seen. Dakota had looked at her work with genuine appreciation, had listened to her story without judgment, had somehow understood the core of who she was in just a few short hours. It was both thrilling and terrifying. "You care for him already," a voice said beside her, and Zara started. She had not noticed old Mrs. Chen approaching. The elderly Chinese woman had come to Cherry Creek with her son, who ran the laundry, and she was known for her wisdom and her uncanny ability to read people. "Is it that obvious?" Zara asked ruefully. Mrs. Chen smiled. "To someone who knows what to look for. You watch the North Trail like a sailor's wife watches the sea. Your hands are still, but your heart is busy." "I barely know him," Zara said, repeating her earlier protest. "Knowing someone is not just about time," Mrs. Chen said gently. "It is about seeing truly. He saw you today, yes, and you saw him. That is more than many couples learn in years of marriage." She settled into the chair beside Zara. "You know why I know this? Because I saw the same recognition in his eyes when he looked at you. Like a man finding water in the desert." "What if I am wrong?" Zara whispered. "What if this is just the excitement of the moment, the fear making everything feel more intense?" "Then you will learn that and you will adjust," Mrs. Chen said pragmatically. "But what if you are right? What if this is the real thing, the kind of connection people search their whole lives for? Would you really walk away from that out of fear?" Zara thought about the last 3 years, about the careful, controlled life she had built. Safe, predictable, lonely. And she thought about the way her heart had leapt when Dakota walked through that door, the way the world had suddenly seemed brighter and more vivid just from his presence. "No," she said finally. "No, I would not walk away." Mrs. Chen patted her hand. "Good. Because that man, he is walking toward you. The question is whether you will meet him halfway." The night passed without incident, though few people slept well. Zara dozed fitfully in the room Mrs. Henderson had prepared for her, startling awake at every sound, her dreams full of blue eyes and broad shoulders and a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. Morning came gray and cool, with low clouds obscuring the mountain peaks. Zara helped Mrs. Henderson with breakfast, then insisted on going to check on her shop despite protests. Thomas accompanied her, his blacksmith's hammer slung over his shoulder like a weapon. The shop was undisturbed, her kiln exactly as she had left it. Zara breathed a sigh of relief and quickly checked her remaining inventory, making sure nothing had been damaged or stolen during the night. Everything was fine, but she still felt uneasy leaving it, as if she was abandoning something precious. "Your work is special," Thomas said, watching her move among her shelves. "Caroline has one of your bowls, uses it every day for her morning porridge. She says it makes even simple food taste better, eating from something so beautiful." Zara smiled despite her worry. "That is exactly what I hoped for when I started this. Beauty should not be just for the wealthy, locked away in fancy parlors. It should be part of everyday life, something that lifts the spirit even in small ways." "Well, you have succeeded," Thomas said warmly. "Half the homes in Cherry Creek have at least one of your pieces. You have made this place more beautiful just by being here." They returned to the house to find activity in the street. Men were fortifying positions, moving supplies, preparing for trouble. The general consensus seemed to be that if Callahan's men were going to retaliate, it would be today or tomorrow. After that, they would lose the element of surprise, and the odds would shift against them. The day dragged on with agonizing slowness. Zara tried to stay busy, helping where she could, but her eyes kept drifting to the North Trail. Dakota had said he would be back by sunset. She told herself not to worry, that he was clearly capable of taking care of himself, but she could not shake the anxiety that sat like a stone in her stomach. What if he ran into trouble? What if Callahan's men had found him on the trail? What if he decided that Cherry Creek and its problems were not worth coming back for? That last thought hurt more than she wanted to admit. In the space of a single day, Dakota Pierce had become important to her in a way that defied logic. She barely knew him, and yet the thought of never seeing him again made her chest ache. Sunset approached with still no sign of him. The watch was doubled, everyone on high alert. Zara stood at the window, watching the light fade from the sky, painting the clouds in shades of gold and rose. The mountains to the west were dark silhouettes, their peaks lost in the gathering gloom. "He will come," Mrs. Henderson said, coming to stand beside her. "Men like that, they keep their word." "What if he cannot?" Zara asked softly. "What if something happened?" "Then we will deal with that when we know for certain," Mrs. Henderson said practically. "But until then, have faith." Faith. Zara turned the word over in her mind. She had lost her faith in many things over the past few years. Faith in people, faith in security, faith in the future. But standing there watching the sunset, she realized she wanted to have faith in this. In the possibility that maybe the universe was not entirely cruel, that maybe good things could still happen. The last light was fading from the sky when someone shouted. Zara's heart leapt as she saw riders approaching from the north. 3 of them, moving fast. As they got closer, she recognized Dakota's massive form on the lead horse, and relief flooded through her so intensely her knees went weak. He had come back. Zara was out the door before she could think about it, hurrying down the street toward where Dakota was dismounting. Behind him were Sheriff Morrison and one of his deputies, both looking grim. Dakota saw her approaching, and his face lit up with a smile that made her heart skip. He took 2 long strides and met her halfway, and Zara did something she had never done in her life. She threw her arms around him in a fierce hug, not caring what anyone thought for a moment. Dakota went still with surprise. Then his arms came around her, careful and gentle despite his strength, holding her close. Zara pressed her face against his chest, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart, and felt something inside her relax that she had not even realized was tensed. "I was worried," she said into his shirt, her voice muffled. "I am sorry," Dakota murmured, his breath stirring her hair. We had to ride hard to find the sheriff and make it back before dark. I did not mean to worry you." Zara pulled back enough to look up at him, very aware that they were standing in the middle of the street with half the town watching. But she did not care. "I am glad you are safe." "I am glad you are safe," Dakota countered, his blue eyes warm as they looked down at her. "I thought about you all day, worried about you here unprotected." "I am fine," Zara assured him. "Nothing happened, but I was worried about you." "What if you had encountered Callahan's men on the trail?" "I did," Dakota said grimly, and Zara's breath caught. "About 10 miles north of here. 6 of them, riding south with bad intentions written all over their faces. We had a conversation." "A conversation?" Sheriff Morrison said dryly, walking up behind them. "Is that what we are calling it? You faced down 6 armed outlaws, convinced them that attacking Cherry Creek would be a fatal mistake, and sent them running with their tails between their legs. They were reasonable once we established the parameters of the discussion," Dakota said mildly. But Zara could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand had never strayed far from his rifle. "He told them he was done being patient with Callahan's operation," the deputy supplied, a note of awe in his voice. "Said he has been tracking their movements for months, knows where all their camps are, and if they laid one finger on anyone in Cherry Creek, he would hunt them down one by one." Then he pulled out a map showing exactly where all those camps are, and I swear I have never seen grown men look so scared. Zara stared at Dakota in shock. "You have been tracking the Callahan gang." Dakota looked uncomfortable with the attention. "They killed a friend of mine last winter. Good man, trapper I knew for years. They raided his cabin, took everything, shot him and left him to die in the snow. I found him, but it was too late. I have been watching them since, waiting for the right moment to act. When I heard they were expanding operations into this area, I figured it was time to do something about it." "So you are not just a trapper," Zara said slowly, pieces clicking together. "You are a hunter." "Sometimes the two are not so different," Dakota said quietly. "But yes. Some prey walks on 2 legs instead of 4. Does not make them any less dangerous or any less deserving of what is coming to them." Sheriff Morrison clapped Dakota on the shoulder. "Whatever your methods, you have bought us some time. They will not hit Cherry Creek tonight, probably not for a while. And I sent my deputy on to Fort Collins to request federal marshal assistance. If we can coordinate properly, we might finally shut Callahan down for good." "That is good news," Thomas said, arriving with several other men. "We should celebrate. Dakota, you will stay and eat with us. It is the least we can do." Dakota hesitated, his eyes going to Zara. "I do not want to impose." "You are not imposing," Zara said firmly, her hand still on his arm. "Please stay, I would like you to." Something in her voice must have convinced him because he nodded. "All right, but I need to see to my horse first." "I will help you," Zara said immediately, and ignored the knowing looks from Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Chen. They walked to the livery stable together, falling into a comfortable silence. Dakota's horse was a magnificent animal, a roan gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm disposition. He greeted Dakota with a soft whinny, nuzzling his shoulder as Dakota began removing the saddle. "What is his name?" Zara asked, reaching up to stroke the horse's neck. "Thunder," Dakota said. "Because that is what he sounds like when he runs at full gallop. I raised him from a colt, trained him myself. He has been my constant companion for 5 years now." Zara watched Dakota work, admiring the efficient way he moved, the gentle care he took with the animal. "You were really tracking the Callahan gang all this time?" "Yes," Dakota said, not looking up from checking Thunder's hooves. "After what they did to my friend, I could not just let it go. Bill was a good man. He never hurt anyone, just wanted to live his life in peace. They killed him for a winter's worth of furs and whatever supplies he had, left him bleeding in the snow. I am sorry, Zara said softly. It must have been hard finding him like that. It was, Dakota admitted. It reminded me too much of coming home to find my wife and son dead. That helpless feeling, like if I had just been there, maybe I could have changed things, made a difference. You could not have known, Zara said gently, with your family or your friend. You cannot blame yourself for things outside your control. Dakota was quiet for a long moment. My head knows that. My heart is slower to learn. I think that is why I went after Callahan's gang, because this time I could do something. I could make sure they paid for what they did. I could protect other people from suffering the same loss. And you saved us, Zara said. If you had not been here yesterday, those men would have hurt Mrs. Henderson, maybe killed Mr. Yates. You made a difference when it mattered. Dakota finally looked up at her, his expression vulnerable in a way she had not seen before. Is that enough? Does doing one good thing balance out all the times I was not there when people needed me? Zara moved closer, reaching up to touch his face, feeling the roughness of his beard against her palm. You cannot save everyone. No one can. But you save who you can when you can, and that matters. It matters to Mrs. Henderson and her unborn baby. It matters to Mr. Yates. It matters to everyone in this town. And it matters to me. Dakota's hand came up to cover hers, his eyes intense as they searched her face. You matter to me. I know that probably sounds strange given that we just met, but I have not been able to stop thinking about you. About the way you stood there ready to defend people with nothing but a poker and your courage. About your hands creating beautiful things. About the way you talked about wanting to bring beauty into everyday life. I feel like I have been asleep for 7 years, and suddenly I am awake again. Zara's heart was racing, her breath coming short. I feel it too. Like something in me recognized something in you. Like maybe we are both people who have been alone too long and maybe we do not have to be anymore. Dakota leaned down, his forehead touching hers, his breath warm on her skin. Can I court you properly, Zara Grimsby? Can I come back to Cherry Creek and spend time with you and see if this feeling between us is real? Yes, Zara whispered. Please, yes. The kiss, when it came, was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Dakota's lips were soft despite his rough exterior, and he kissed her like she was something precious, something to be cherished. Zara felt the world narrow to just this moment, just the two of them in the shadowy stable with Thunder watching benevolently. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Dakota smiled down at her, a real smile that transformed his whole face, and Zara felt like she could float. We should get back, she said reluctantly, before people send a search party. Probably wise, Dakota agreed, but he did not immediately move, just stood there looking at her like he was memorizing her face. They walked back to the Henderson house hand in hand, and if anyone noticed, they were kind enough not to comment directly. Mrs. Henderson just smiled knowingly and made sure Dakota got the best portions at dinner. The meal was festive despite the lingering tension, people relieved to have their sheriff back and grateful for Dakota's intervention. After dinner, Dakota played his harmonica, filling the house with melancholy mountain melodies. Zara sat beside him, listening to the music and watching his hands move on the instrument. Those same hands that could handle a rifle or track outlaws could also create this beauty, this emotion expressed through sound. She thought about what Mrs. Chen had said about truly seeing someone, and felt that she was beginning to see Dakota Pierce in all his complexity. Later, when most people had drifted off to their homes or sleeping spots, Dakota walked Zara to her borrowed room. They stood in the hallway, reluctant to part. I need to head back to my cabin tomorrow, Dakota said quietly. I have traps to check, and I should secure my supplies before I spend more time away. But I will be back in a week, less if I can manage it. And after that, if you are willing, I would like to visit regularly, get to know you properly, court you the way you deserve." "I would like that," Zara said, "but a week is a long time." "It will feel like forever," Dakota agreed, "but I will think of you every moment, and when I come back, maybe you can show me how you make your pottery. I would like to watch you create." "I would like that too," Zara said. Then daringly she stood on her toes and kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Be safe out there." "Always am," Dakota promised. "You be safe here. Keep your poker close just in case." Zara laughed softly. "I will, though I hope Sheriff Morrison's presence will discourage any more trouble." "It should," Dakota said. "But promise me you will be careful anyway. I just found you. I am not ready to lose you." "I promise," Zara said solemnly. "I just found you too." Dakota left at dawn before most of the town was awake. But Zara was at the window, watching him ride out, and he turned in his saddle to wave at her, as if he had known she would be there. She watched until he was just a speck on the horizon, then disappeared entirely into the mountain foothills. The week that followed was both the longest and shortest of Zara's life. She moved back into her shop, taking sensible precautions but refusing to live in fear. Sheriff Morrison kept a close watch on the town, and there was no further trouble from the Callahan gang. Word had spread about Dakota's warning, and apparently even hardened outlaws thought twice about crossing a man who had tracked them so thoroughly. Zara threw herself into her work, trying to keep busy. She opened her kiln to find that the pieces inside had fired beautifully, the glazes achieving exactly the depth and color she had hoped for. She spent hours at her wheel, creating new pieces, her hands moving in the familiar rhythms of her craft while her mind wandered to a mountain cabin and the man who lived there. She found herself creating pieces inspired by Dakota. Bowls in the deep blue of his eyes, vases with the strong, simple lines of his frame, cups glazed in colors that reminded her of mountain sunsets and pine forests. Each piece was infused with the feeling he had sparked in her, the hope and possibility and tentative joy. Mrs. Henderson visited often, her belly growing noticeably larger by the day. "You are glowing," she told Zara one afternoon. "Love suits you." "Is that what this is?" Zara asked, holding up a bowl to examine the glaze. "Love, so soon? Do you doubt it?" Mrs. Henderson countered. Zara was quiet for a moment, then shook her head. "No, no, I do not doubt it. It is terrifying how certain I am, actually. I have known him for one day, and yet I feel like I have been waiting for him my whole life." "Then trust that feeling," Mrs. Henderson advised. "The heart knows things the head takes longer to figure out." 6 days after Dakota left, Zara was working late at her wheel, trying to get the shape of a particular vase just right, when she heard a soft knock on her door. Her heart leapt, but she forced herself to stay calm. It was probably just someone wanting to place an order or Mrs. Henderson checking on her. But when she opened the door, Dakota was standing there, looking dusty and travel-worn and absolutely wonderful. "You said a week," Zara said, unable to keep the joy out of her voice. "I said a week or less if I could manage it," Dakota replied with a grin. "I managed it, could not stay away. Kept thinking about you up there, wondering what you were doing, how you were. Finished my necessary work in 5 days and rode back as fast as thunder could carry me." Zara did not even try to hide her smile. "I am glad. I missed you. Can I come in?" Dakota asked. "I brought you something." Zara stepped aside and Dakota entered her shop. He looked around with interest, taking in the new pieces she had created. His eyes lingered on the blue bowls, and she wondered if he recognized himself in them. From his pack, he pulled out a package wrapped in oiled cloth. "I made this for you," he said, suddenly looking uncertain. "I am not an artist like you, but I wanted you to have something." Zara unwrapped the package carefully and caught her breath. Inside was a wooden box, beautifully crafted from what looked like pine and aspen. The lid was inlaid with a pattern of mountains and clouds, the detail work extraordinary. It was clearly made to hold something precious, lined with soft leather to protect its contents. "Dakota, this is beautiful," Zara breathed, running her fingers over the smooth wood. "You made this?" "Yes," he said, still looking uncertain. "I thought you could use it to store your glazes or tools or whatever you needed. I know it is not much compared to what you create, but I wanted to make something with my hands for you, the way you make beauty for others." Zara set the box down carefully and turned to him, her eyes bright with tears. "It is perfect. No one has ever made something for me before. This is the most thoughtful gift I have ever received." Relief flooded Dakota's face. "You really like it?" "I love it," Zara said firmly. "And I love that you thought of me while you were making it, that you took the time and care to create something beautiful just for me." Dakota reached out and cupped her face gently. "I thought of you the entire time I was gone, every trap I checked, every mile I rode, every moment. You have gotten into my head and my heart, Zara Grimsby, and I find I do not want you to leave." "I am not going anywhere," Zara promised, leaning into his touch. "I will be right here, waiting for you every time you have to leave and welcoming you every time you come back." This kiss was deeper than their first, full of 6 days of longing and the joy of reunion. Dakota pulled her close, and Zara melted into his strength, feeling safe and cherished and home in a way she had never experienced before. Over the following months, Dakota became a regular presence in Cherry Creek. He still spent time at his cabin, checking his traps and maintaining his territory, but he came down to the settlement at least twice a week, staying longer each time. The townspeople got used to seeing him walking with Zara by the creek, or sitting in her shop watching her work, or helping with various tasks around town. He proved to be handy in ways beyond tracking and fighting. He helped Thomas at the forge, showing surprising skill with metalwork. He taught the town's young men tracking and wilderness survival, making them better prepared to handle the challenges of frontier life. He even helped Sheriff Morrison establish better defenses and patrol routes. But mostly, he courted Zara. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows and interesting stones she could grind for glaze materials. He took her on carefully supervised rides into the foothills, showing her the beauty of the mountains he loved. He sat with her while she worked, sometimes playing his harmonica, sometimes just watching with that quiet intensity that made her feel like the most important thing in the world. They talked about everything. Their pasts, their dreams, their fears. Dakota told her about his life before tragedy, about his wife Mary and their son James, about the happiness he had known and lost. He spoke without bitterness, with grief, but also with gratitude for the time he had been given. Zara told him about Philadelphia, about the shame of her father's downfall and her own escape west. She admitted her fears of being judged, of being found wanting, of letting people close enough to hurt her. Dakota listened without judgment, holding her hand and telling her that her past did not define her, that he saw who she was now, and that person was extraordinary. In July, Mrs. Henderson gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The whole town celebrated, and Zara gave them one of her finest bowls, blue as mountain skies, for their son's first feeding dish. Mrs. Henderson cried and hugged her tight, saying it would become a family treasure. Dakota was there for the celebration, and watching him hold the tiny baby with such careful gentleness made Zara's heart ache with longing. He would be a wonderful father, she thought. And then she blushed, because that thought implied a future she had no right to assume. But Dakota caught her expression and smiled, his eyes warm with understanding and promise. In August, word came that federal marshals had finally cornered the Callahan gang in a canyon near Boulder. There was a shootout, and when the smoke cleared, Callahan and most of his men were dead or captured. The remainder scattered, broken as an organized force. Dakota's careful tracking and the information he had provided had been crucial to the marshals' success. "It is over," Dakota told Zara that evening as they sat by the creek watching the sunset. "Bill can rest easy now, and people can live without fear of Callahan's gang terrorizing them." "You did that," Zara said softly. "You made that happen. We all did," Dakota corrected. "But yes, I am glad I could help bring them to justice. It feels like closing a chapter." "And starting a new one?" Zara asked hopefully. Dakota turned to look at her, his expression serious. "That depends on you. Zara, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer." Zara's heart started beating faster. "All right." Dakota took her hands in his calloused fingers gentle. "I love you. I think I loved you from the moment I saw you standing in that store with your poker, ready to take on the world to protect people you cared about. These past months have only made me more certain. You are brave and talented and kind and beautiful inside and out. You make me want to be better, to do more, to live fully instead of just existing. I do not want to imagine my life without you in it." Tears were streaming down Zara's face, but she was smiling. "I love you too, so much." "Then marry me," Dakota said simply. "I know my life is not easy. I live in the mountains far from civilization. My cabin is rough and winters are hard. But I promise I will spend every day trying to make you happy. I will build you a workshop so you can create your pottery. I will protect you and cherish you and love you until my last breath. So please, Zara Grimsby, will you marry me?" "Yes," Zara said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." Dakota's face lit up with joy, and he pulled her into his arms, kissing her thoroughly while the creek burbled beside them and the mountains turned gold in the setting sun. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless and laughing, Dakota reached into his pocket. "I made this for you," he said, pulling out a ring. It was simple but beautiful, a gold band set with a small turquoise stone. "The stone is from these mountains. I found it last spring and saved it, not knowing what I would do with it. Now I know I was saving it for you." Zara held out her hand, trembling with emotion, and Dakota slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the turquoise glowing softly in the fading light. They were married in September, when the aspens were turning gold and the air was crisp with the promise of autumn. The whole town turned out for the celebration, which was held in the street in front of Zara's shop. Sheriff Morrison officiated, his voice booming with authority and affection as he pronounced them husband and wife. Zara wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton, which Mrs. Henderson and Mrs. Chen had helped her sew, with wildflowers in her hair. Dakota wore new buckskins, his hair neatly trimmed and his beard shaped, looking like a frontier prince. When he looked at Zara, his eyes shone with such love that several of the women in attendance started crying. The celebration went late into the night, with music and dancing and more food than the town had seen in months. People brought gifts, practical things for their new life together. Tools and blankets, preserved foods and seeds for a garden. Thomas presented them with a set of iron hooks and brackets, perfectly crafted for hanging pots and tools in a cabin. Mr. Yates gave them a credit at his store for whatever supplies they needed, but the most precious gift came from Mrs. Henderson, who presented Zara with a set of 8 bowls, all made by Zara herself over the past 3 years. "We took up a collection," Mrs. Henderson explained. Everyone who had one of your bowls contributed, so you could have a set for your new home. So you will remember that you are loved here, that this is your home no matter where you live. Zara could barely speak through her tears as she thanked everyone. These people, who had been strangers 3 years ago, had become family. They had accepted her, supported her, and now celebrated her happiness as if it were their own. As the party wound down, Dakota and Zara slipped away to her shop one last time. They had spent the past week carefully packing up her tools and materials, preparing to transport everything to Dakota's cabin. He had spent the summer building her a workshop there, a small building with good light and a proper kiln, so she could continue her craft in her new home. "Are you sure about this?" Dakota asked as they stood in the empty shop. "You built this place with your own hands. You have a life here, customers, friends. I do not want you to give that up for me." Zara turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "I am not giving anything up. I am gaining everything. You are my home now, Dakota. Wherever you are, that is where I want to be. And you built me a workshop. You supported my craft. You never asked me to stop being who I am. You just asked me to be that person with you. How could I say no to that?" "I will make you happy," Dakota promised. "I swear it." "You already do," Zara said simply. "Every single day." They spent their first night as husband and wife in the Hendersons' guest room by special arrangement since Dakota's cabin was 2 days' ride away. It was a night of tenderness and discovery, of whispered promises and shared joy. Dakota was gentle and patient, cherishing every moment, and Zara felt herself opening like a flower to the sun, shedding the last of her protective walls. In the morning, they loaded up their supplies and began the journey north. It took 2 days of steady riding, with Thunder carrying most of their goods and Zara riding a gentle mare that Dakota had bought for her from the livery. They camped one night beside a crystal-clear stream, cooking fresh trout over an open fire and sleeping under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. Dakota's cabin, when they finally reached it, took Zara's breath away. It was larger than she had expected, built of solid pine logs with a stone chimney and real glass windows. Inside, it was surprisingly cozy, with a large fireplace, sturdy furniture Dakota had made himself, and cheerful curtains that looked brand new. "I have been fixing it up," Dakota admitted, looking pleased by her reaction. "Wanted it to be nice for you. Come see the workshop." The workshop was everything she could have hoped for. It was a separate building, smaller than the cabin but perfectly designed for her needs. The kiln was stone, expertly built, with proper ventilation and space for storing wood. There were shelves for her supplies, a solid table for her wheel, and windows positioned to catch the northern light. "Dakota, this is perfect," Zara breathed, turning in a slow circle. "How did you know exactly what I would need?" "I paid attention," Dakota said simply. "Watched how you worked, what you reached for, how you moved in your space, tried to recreate that here." Zara threw her arms around him, overcome with gratitude and love. "Thank you. Thank you for understanding what this means to me, for not asking me to give up my art." "Why would I ask you to give up part of who you are?" Dakota asked, genuinely puzzled. "Your hands create beautiful things, Zara. The world needs that beauty. I need it. I just want to be there to see it happen." They settled into married life with surprising ease. Dakota taught Zara the skills she needed for mountain living: how to read the weather, how to preserve meat, how to identify edible plants and dangerous animals. Zara created pottery, experimenting with the different clays she found in the mountain streams, developing new glazes from local materials. They established a rhythm. Dakota would check his trap lines, hunt for meat, maintain their property. Zara would work in her shop, create her art, tend their small garden. In the evenings, they would cook together, eat dinner watching the sunset paint the peaks and talk about their days. Sometimes Dakota played his harmonica and Zara would dance, her movements graceful and free. Twice a month, they rode down to Cherry Creek together, bringing Zara's finished pieces to sell and restocking their supplies. These trips became social occasions, with people eager to see them and hear about their life in the mountains. Zara's pottery remained popular, perhaps even more so now that she only came to town periodically. People said her new pieces had a different quality, a depth that came from contentment and love. Winter came early that year, blanketing the mountains in snow by October. Dakota had prepared well, with a full woodshed and stores of preserved food. Zara found that she loved winter in the mountains, the crystalline silence, the stark beauty of snow-laden pines. She worked in her shop, which Dakota kept warm with a small stove, creating pieces inspired by winter. Bowls in shades of ice blue and snow white, vases with crystalline glazes that sparkled like frost. On the darkest night of December, Zara realized she was with child. She told Dakota on Christmas morning, presenting him with a tiny cup she had made, sized for a baby's hand. Dakota stared at the cup for a long moment, then looked up at her with tears streaming down his face. "A baby! We are having a baby!" "Yes," Zara confirmed, her own eyes wet. "In late summer, I think." Dakota swept her up carefully, spinning her around despite her laughing protests about being careful. "I am going to be a father again," he said wonderingly. "Zara, you have given me everything. A reason to live, a home, and now a child. How did I get so blessed?" "We are both blessed," Zara corrected, touching his face tenderly. "We found each other when we both needed it most. We saved each other, Dakota." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Zara continued working as long as she could, creating a special set of dishes for their coming child. Dakota was protective to the point of being comical, barely letting her lift anything heavier than a teacup. He made a cradle from pine and aspen, carving tiny animals into the headboard. He rode to Cherry Creek to get advice from Mrs. Henderson and to arrange for a midwife to come stay with them as Zara's time approached. In late August, on a day when wildflowers covered the mountain meadows in brilliant color, Zara went into labor. The midwife, a capable woman named Sarah who had come up a week earlier, guided her through it with calm efficiency. Dakota held Zara's hand, offering encouragement and support, his face pale but determined. After hours of labor, as the sun was setting behind the peaks, Zara gave birth to a healthy baby boy. He came into the world with a lusty cry, his little face red and angry, his tiny fists waving. "He has your determination," Dakota said, his voice choked with emotion as he held his son for the first time. "Look at him, ready to fight the world already." They named him James William Pierce, after Dakota's first son and the friend whose death had led Dakota to Zara. It was a name that honored the past while celebrating the future. Watching Dakota with their son, Zara felt her heart overflow. He was so gentle, so protective, cradling the tiny body against his broad chest and singing soft songs in a rumbling voice. James seemed to find his father's presence comforting, settling down to sleep in those strong arms. "I was terrified," Dakota admitted later that night, after the midwife had checked on Zara one last time and retired to the guest room. "Afraid of losing you like I lost Mary. Afraid I would fail this child like I felt I failed James. But then I saw him, saw you, and I realized that fear has no place here. This is a new beginning, a chance to do things right." "You already are doing things right," Zara assured him, watching him rock their son gently. "You are present. You are loving. You are here. That is all any of us need." As summer turned to autumn, they settled into life as parents. Dakota proved to be everything Zara had known he would be: patient, loving, protective, but not overbearing. He would carry James in a sling while checking trap lines, talking to his son about the mountains and the animals and the trees. At night, he would walk the floor with a fussy baby, singing mountain songs until James fell asleep. Zara found that motherhood and artistry could coexist. She worked during James's naps, creating pieces with a new depth and richness. She made a series of bowls that she called the Mother Set, glazed in soft colors that reminded her of milk and sleep and gentle mornings. When she brought them to Cherry Creek that October, they sold within hours with orders for more. "You are creating pieces that speak to the soul," Mrs. Chen told her, holding one of the bowls up to the light. "This is not just pottery anymore, Zara. This is art that captures something essential about being human." James grew quickly, a happy baby who loved the mountains and the animals and the expansive sky. By his first birthday, he was walking, tottering around the cabin with Dakota hovering anxiously nearby. He had his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined expression, and he was utterly fearless. "He is going to give us gray hair," Dakota said, swooping in to catch James before he could toddle too close to the fireplace. "Probably," Zara agreed, laughing, "but he is going to be extraordinary. How could he not be with the life we are giving him?" When James was 2, Zara discovered she was pregnant again. This time, it was a girl, born in the spring with her father's eyes and a head of dark curls. They named her Grace because that was what she represented: the grace of second chances, of new beginnings, of love that healed old wounds. Dakota cried when he held her, this tiny daughter who looked up at him with such trust. "I never thought I would have this again," he told Zara. "A family. Children to raise and love. You gave me back my life, Zara. You gave me back my heart." "And you gave me mine," Zara replied, watching her husband with their daughter. "You saw me, truly saw me when everyone else just looked past. You told me my hands created beautiful things, but my heart was more beautiful still. You made me believe that about myself." The years flowed by like the creek outside their cabin, steady and full of life. James grew into a strong, capable boy who loved the mountains as much as his father did. Grace became her mother's shadow, learning to work clay almost as soon as she could walk, creating lopsided bowls that Zara treasured more than her finest pieces. Dakota continued his work, though he focused more on guiding and teaching than trapping now. He took parties of hunters into the high country, taught wilderness skills to greenhorns from back east, worked as a tracker for the occasional sheriff or marshal who needed help. He was known and respected throughout the territory, but he always came home to his family, to the cabin that had become filled with laughter and love. Zara's reputation as a potter grew beyond Cherry Creek. Her pieces were sought after throughout Colorado territory and beyond, sold in shops in Denver and Colorado Springs. She could have made a fortune if she had wanted to, but she preferred to keep her production small and personal, creating pieces that mattered rather than churning out quantities for profit. "Each piece should be special," she told Grace, who at age 7 was already showing real talent. "It should have a soul. When someone uses one of my bowls or cups, I want them to feel that care and attention. I want them to know that someone put love into creating this thing that is now part of their life." They made annual trips to Cherry Creek, where they were always welcomed with celebration. Mrs. Henderson's son grew up alongside James, the two boys becoming fast friends. Mr. Yates retired and his son took over the general store. Thomas and Mrs. Henderson had 3 more children, filling their home with noise and joy. Cherry Creek itself grew and prospered, eventually becoming large enough to be officially incorporated as a town. They built a proper church, a real school, even a town hall. But it never lost its sense of community, that frontier spirit of neighbors helping neighbors and everyone looking out for each other. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Dakota and Zara rode up to a high meadow they loved, leaving the children with friends in Cherry Creek for a few days. It was late summer, and the wildflowers were in full bloom, painting the landscape in brilliant colors. "You remember the first time we came here?" Dakota asked as they sat on a blanket watching the sunset. "Of course," Zara said, leaning against his shoulder. "It was our honeymoon trip. You brought me up here and told me this was your favorite place in the whole world." "It still is," Dakota said. "Even more so now because I have been here with you." Zara looked up at him, this man who had saved her in so many ways. 10 years had added some silver to his dark hair and a few lines around his eyes, but he was still the strong, capable mountain man who had walked into her life like an answer to a prayer. "Are you happy, Dakota? Truly?" "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Dakota replied, pulling her close. "Content, grateful, blessed. I have a wife I love more with each passing day. I have children who bring me joy I did not think possible. I have work that matters and a life that means something. What more could any man ask for?" "I feel the same way," Zara said softly. "I came west running from my past, trying to prove I could survive on my own. I built a life with my hands, created beauty from clay. But it was not until I found you that I really started living. You taught me that beauty is not just what we create, it is what we become when we open ourselves to love." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the mountains turn gold and purple in the fading light. Below them, somewhere in those forests, was the cabin they had made into a home. In Cherry Creek, their children were probably being spoiled by Mrs. Henderson and getting into mischief with her sons. Tomorrow they would ride down and reclaim them, return to the routines of their life. But for now, it was just the two of them, two people who had been alone and hurting and lost, who had found each other and built something beautiful. The potter and the mountain man, bound together by love and trust, and the shared belief that broken things could be mended, that new beginnings were always possible, that beauty could be created even in the wildest places. "Your hands create beautiful things," Dakota said quietly, echoing his words from that first day. "But your heart, Zara Pierce, your heart is the most beautiful thing of all." Zara smiled, taking his large, calloused hand in hers, fingers intertwining. "We are beautiful together," she said. "Two people who each thought they would be alone, creating a life neither of us dared to dream about." As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, brilliant and infinite, they held each other close. The mountains stood eternal around them, witnesses to their love story. In the distance, a wolf howled, and thunder answered with a soft nicker from where he was grazing nearby. This was their life now. Not without challenges, certainly not without hardship. Mountain winters were cruel, and frontier life was unforgiving. But they faced it together, drawing strength from each other, creating beauty even in difficult times. When James was 12 and Grace was 10, Zara was surprised to find herself pregnant once more. This pregnancy was harder than her previous ones, perhaps because she was older now, but she weathered it with Dakota's constant support. In the spring, they welcomed twin boys whom they named Daniel and Thomas, after no one in particular, just names they liked. "4 children," Dakota said, looking dazed as he held a baby in each arm. "We have 4 children, Zara." "Yes, we do," Zara confirmed, equally amazed. "Our cup runneth over." The twins were a handful, energetic and mischievous from the start. But James and Grace doted on their little brothers, helping their parents manage the chaos of a suddenly much larger household. The cabin felt small now, so Dakota spent a summer building an addition, expanding their home to accommodate their growing family. Zara's workshop became a sanctuary, a place where she could escape the noise and chaos for a few hours and reconnect with herself through her art. She found that motherhood gave her new perspectives, new depths to explore in her work. She created a series she called The Family, each piece representing a different aspect of domestic life. The joy, the chaos, the exhaustion, the profound love that made it all worthwhile. When the twins were 5, tragedy struck Cherry Creek. A fire started in the saloon and spread quickly, consuming several buildings before it could be controlled. Zara's old shop was destroyed, along with the general store and several homes. Miraculously, no one was killed, but many families lost everything. Dakota and Zara rode down as soon as they heard, bringing supplies and offering their help. They found the town in shock, people sitting in the streets surrounded by what few possessions they had managed to save. "We will rebuild," Sheriff Morrison said grimly. He was an old man now, his hair white and his movements slow, but his spirit was undiminished. "We have done it before, we will do it again." "And you will not do it alone," Dakota said firmly. He turned to address the gathered townspeople. "Anyone who needs shelter, our cabin is open. It will be cramped, but you are welcome. Anyone who needs supplies, we will share what we have, and I will stay here as long as it takes to help rebuild." His words sparked something in the defeated crowd. Other people started speaking up, offering what they could. Mrs. Chen's laundry had been spared, and she offered it as a temporary gathering place. Thomas's forge still stood, and he immediately began working on nails and tools they would need for construction. Mrs. Henderson, now gray-haired and a grandmother several times over, organized the women to handle food and coordinate efforts. Zara set up a temporary pottery operation in an intact barn, teaching people how to make basic dishes and bowls to replace what had been lost. It became a community effort, with people of all ages trying their hand at the wheel, laughing at their clumsy attempts but persevering. It took most of the summer, but Cherry Creek rose from the ashes stronger than before. The new buildings were better constructed, with fire breaks and other safety measures incorporated. Zara's old shop was rebuilt, and the town insisted she keep it, even though she lived in the mountains now. "For when you visit," they said, "so you always have a place here." That experience reinforced what Dakota and Zara had always known. They were not just individuals or even just a family. They were part of a community, bound together by shared experiences and mutual support. The frontier could be harsh and unforgiving, but it could also bring out the best in people, forging connections that went soul deep. As their children grew, each developed their own interests and talents. James became a skilled tracker and guide like his father, comfortable in the wilderness, and respected by the Ute people who lived in the higher elevations. Grace inherited her mother's artistic talent, but applied it to painting as well as pottery, creating stunning landscapes that captured the raw beauty of the Colorado mountains. The twins were inseparable, getting into trouble together and supporting each other through everything. Daniel showed an affinity for animals, able to gentle the wildest horse or befriend the most skittish dog. Thomas loved working with wood, creating furniture and carvings with the same attention to beauty and function that his mother brought to her pottery. Dakota watched his children grow with a mix of pride and wonder. "I never thought I would have this," he told Zara on their 20th anniversary. They were sitting on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching the sunset and listening to their children's voices drift from inside. "A second chance at family, at being a father, at having this richness in my life. You deserved it," Zara said firmly. "You always deserved it. The tragedy that took your first family was not punishment, Dakota. It was just the random cruelty of the world. But this, what we have built together, this is what you earned through your goodness and strength and love." "We built it together," Dakota corrected. "I was just surviving before you. You taught me to live again." "And you taught me that I was worthy of being loved," Zara replied. "That my past did not define me, that I could be more than just the daughter of a disgraced businessman. You saw me, truly saw me, and loved what you saw. That changed everything." Their children eventually began making their own ways in the world. James married a Ute woman named Morning Star, bridging the gap between the native peoples and the settlers in a way that brought understanding and respect to both communities. They built a cabin near Dakota and Zara's, raising their own children to honor both heritages. Grace went to Denver to study art, returning 2 years later with a husband who was a photographer. Together, they documented the changing West, her paintings and his photographs, creating a visual record of a time and place that was rapidly evolving. They settled in Cherry Creek, which had continued to grow and was now considering applying for city status. The twins took longer to settle down, spending years exploring and adventuring. Daniel worked as a ranch hand throughout the territory, learning animal husbandry from the best. Thomas joined a furniture maker in Denver, perfecting his craft. But eventually, both returned to the mountains, drawn back to the place that had shaped them. As Dakota and Zara grew older, they gradually slowed down. Dakota's knees started bothering him after too many years of hard mountain living, and Zara developed arthritis in her hands that made working the wheel difficult. But they adapted, finding new ways to contribute and create. Dakota became a teacher, passing on his wilderness knowledge to a new generation. Young men came from all over the territory to learn from the legendary mountain man, and he taught them not just skills but wisdom, about respecting the land and the native peoples, about living in harmony with the wilderness rather than trying to conquer it. Zara could no longer spend hours at the wheel, but she created smaller pieces, each one a masterwork of concentrated effort and artistic vision. These late pieces became her most valuable, sought after by collectors throughout the West. But she also taught, passing her knowledge to Grace and to other young artists who came seeking instruction. On their 30th anniversary, their children and grandchildren gathered at the mountain cabin for a celebration. The place was packed with people, 3 generations of family filling the expanded home to bursting. There was music and laughter, stories and memories shared. James stood up to make a toast, his voice carrying over the happy chaos. 30 years ago, my father walked into a general store in Cherry Creek and met a woman with a poker who was ready to take on 3 armed outlaws to protect people she cared about. He says that was the moment he started living again after years of just surviving. And my mother says that was the moment she learned she was brave enough to let someone see who she really was. He raised his glass. They built a life together out here in these mountains, a life based on love and respect and partnership. They showed us what it means to be truly married, truly committed. They taught us that beauty matters, that art and craft and creativity are not luxuries but necessities for the soul. They taught us that family is everything, that community matters, that we are all responsible for taking care of each other. So here is to Dakota and Zara Pierce, James continued, his voice thick with emotion. To 30 years of marriage, to the potter and the mountain man, to the people who taught us all how to live. The toast was echoed by everyone present, glasses raised in salute. Dakota and Zara stood together, surrounded by the family they had created, the life they had built. Both had tears streaming down their faces, overwhelmed by the love in the room. "I cannot believe this is my life," Zara whispered to Dakota. That scared girl who came west with nothing but her father's tools and her determination, who thought she would always be alone, who never imagined she could have this much. "Believe it," Dakota said, pulling her close. "You created this with your beautiful heart and your strong hands and your brave spirit. You created a family, a legacy, a life that matters." "We created it," Zara corrected, echoing his words from years before. "Together, always together." As the celebration continued around them, they slipped outside for a moment of quiet. The mountains rose dark against the star-filled sky, eternal and unchanging. How many sunsets had they watched from this porch? How many mornings had they greeted together? How many moments of joy and sorrow and simple daily living had they shared in this place? "No regrets?" Dakota asked softly. "Not a single one," Zara replied firmly. "Every choice led me here to you, to this. How could I regret any of it?" "I love you," Dakota said, the same words he had spoken thousands of times over 30 years, and yet they never lost their power. "I love you too," Zara replied, the response that was as natural as breathing. "Today, tomorrow, always." They stood there together, the potter and the mountain man, watching the stars wheel overhead. Behind them, through the cabin windows, they could see their family, hear the laughter and music. Before them stretched the wilderness they both loved, wild and beautiful and free. This was their legacy, they realized. Not just the pottery that would outlast them, or the children and grandchildren who carried their names and their values forward. It was the example they had set, the proof that broken people could heal, that lonely souls could find each other, that beauty could be created even in the harshest circumstances. The Wild West was changing. The frontier was closing. Towns were becoming cities, wilderness was being tamed, the old ways were giving way to the new. But some things remained constant: love, family, the human need for beauty and connection. The courage it took to be vulnerable, to let yourself be seen, to build something precious and defend it against all threats. As they turned to go back inside, back to their family and their celebration, Dakota paused. "Your hands created beautiful things," he said one more time, looking at Zara with the same intensity he had shown on that first day 30 years ago. "But your heart, Zara Pierce, your heart is the most beautiful thing of all." Zara smiled, taking his hand, feeling the familiar calluses and strength. "We are beautiful together," she replied, "and we always will be." They walked back into the light and the warmth, into the laughter and the love, into the life they had built together through courage and faith, and the simple decision to say yes to the possibility of happiness. The mountains stood guard around them, and the stars shone overhead, and their family welcomed them back with open arms. It was, in every way that mattered, exactly perfect. And as they rejoined the celebration, surrounded by the evidence of a life well lived and a love well tended, Dakota and Zara knew that they had found what everyone seeks: a place to belong, a person to love, a reason to wake up grateful every single day. The potter and the mountain man, together until the end, creating beauty still.